Tonight, the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra will be celebrating the legacy of the Boston Pops Orchestra. The WSO's tribute to the Boston Pops will promise famous film score moments, light classics, and audience favorites that you can enjoy without leaving the comfort and safety of your own home. Joining me here over Zoom is WSO Artistic Operations Associate James Manishen. Hi, James. It's nice to
Hello,
see you.
Chris. Nice to see you or hear you.
Yeah. One of the first questions I have as the guy who does the programming here at the station, and I know you do a lot of programming and writing for the WSO as well, it's been a constantly evolving season for the WSO. What's it been like for you? Have you had to feel like you're reinventing the wheel every couple of weeks, or what has this past year been like for you?
Well, it's been a slightly different medium because, of course, we're live streaming concerts. And when you do that sort of thing, you have the visual that impacts on it. It's actually not just a case of turning the camera on to the orchestra. It's planning a whole visual narrative alongside the music, which is a whole other skill set. And fortunately, we have some very good people that are helping us. We have Naomi Wu, who is our assistant conductor in the booth. She helps to direct the shots, and I've done one as well. And it also affords some opportunities too. So we're looking forward to having some of our POPs programs down the road with images and additional features that will take advantage of the medium. So there have been, of course, a lot of issues with COVID, of course, but some opportunities that are beginning to emerge too.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about tonight's concert. The concert is a tribute to the Boston Pops. I guess the obvious question is why the Boston Pops? Why is the concert featuring the Boston Pops Orchestra?
Well, for many, many years, as you know, the Boston Pops has been the most famous pops orchestra in the world. And this was attributable to its conductor, Arthur Fiedler. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about a Winnipeg connection to Fiedler, a personal one, because I was in the orchestra from 1966 to 69 when Fiedler would come and direct some of our pops concerts, which were called fanfare concerts back then. But it goes really back to the 1930s when members of the Boston Symphony formed the Boston Pops. And Fiedler created this series of Pops concerts that took over Symphony Hall. They would put tables down on the main floor, and there were programs of light music, and it just really, really took off in large measure because he was a very dynamic, exciting conductor, and he was able to sell them. So we, of course, and every other orchestra in the world got on board to develop Pops concerts. And when Victor Felbro was hired here in 1958, he was the first conductor to put the orchestra in a contract. One of the stipulations of his contract agreement was that there be a Pops series. And the earliest Pop series were to be without charge, with just a silver collection. And these would take place at the old Winnipeg Auditorium, Sunday afternoons. And they were easy listening and light classics programs with a whole variety of things. And you put what you could into the basket as it came around. And then those would evolve later on into larger scale events.
It's amazing. So what can people expect from tonight's concert?
Well, they can expect really to go back in time a little bit to a lot of the Boston Pops features that made it so famous. And in 1936, there was a young dance band arranger by the name of Leroy Anderson who sort of caught the attention of Arthur Fiedler with his arranging skills and his composing skills. And Fiedler went to Anderson and said, "Why don't you write something for one of our concerts?" So Anderson composed this little piece called Jazz Pizzicato. Of course, it wasn't long enough to fill a 78 record, so Felix suggested, why don't you put a tail end on it, call it Jazz Legato. So Jazz Pizzicato, Jazz Legato were the first two Leroy Anderson pieces. And from then on, Fiedler encouraged him, and there were many, many works of Leroy Anderson's that I think people may be more familiar with the music itself than the actual name, but if I mention a few, The Syncopated Clock, Bugler's Holiday, Blue Tango, The Waltzing Cat, and so forth, Belle of the Ball, all these things were lovely pieces. And we're going to have, I believe we have four of them on our program, four Leroy Anderson pieces. And Julian Pelicano, who's conducting, will describe the genesis of these. And what Leroy Anderson had, he was not only a great tunesmith, he was a superb orchestrator. So he took the easy listening component of the music and expanded it using the full resources of the symphony orchestra. So you got this feeling that this is great music that's easy to listen to, but really uses all the forces at hand.
Yeah, it's very accessible stuff. Quick question. Audiences might not hear, will they hear the typewriter? That's the piece I always associate with Leroy Anderson.
Right. Well, the typewriter actually has a typewriter in it.
Yeah.
and Julian will play it. Fiedler actually, when Leroy Anderson would conduct the piece himself, Fiedler would sit off to the side and he would mime a typewriter that's right there. And of course, it's the kind of piece that where the typewriter, the sounds of the clicking is worked right into the score. And it's a lot of fun. But there are a lot of other things of Leroy Anderson's that are beautiful too, that will be on the show.
So that was going to be my question. Who's the typewriter soloist? I guess it's Julian, eh?
It's Julian. Yes, he will do it from the podium.
Oh, that's great. Whenever I think of Pops concerts, when I was a kid, I used to watch them on PBS with the Boston Pops, and very often, if I was lucky enough, John Williams would be conducting the Boston Pops. And whenever I think of the Pops sound, one of the things that always strikes me is this big, lush string section, especially for these film scores, like by guys like Miklos Rocha and of course John Williams. And the other thing is large wind sections, especially for again music for John Williams. When you guys were picking pieces to play for this Pops concert, did you have to take social distancing into effect and how many players you could have on stage as to what Pops pieces you could perform?
Absolutely. That's the big challenge with all of this. When you have a limited number of players that you can have, you want to pick pieces that still have the sound of the full orchestra, but respect the social distancing aspect of it. And of course, we're very hopeful that as things open up, we can add more players. We have 67 players.
Right.
And many of our concerts this year have been a maximum of 25, and then our next point is 40 players on the stage, distanced, of course. So we have our fingers crossed. We would like to be able to move this on. But the nice thing about many of the Pops pieces, Leroy Anderson sounds like there are a lot more players playing than there actually are because of the way it's scored. And here's one of these composers like even Sibelius and Vaughan Williams, where they're conventional forces, but it sounds like there are many more that are performing.
So is there one piece on the program that you yourself are looking forward to? I mean, as somebody who is heavily involved in the programming for WSO concerts, when it came to programming a Pops concert, was there one piece that you just had to have on the concert for tonight?
Well, I couldn't really pick one because these are mostly short pieces on there. But well, for me personally, it goes back to the Fiedler years because I played under him. He performed here several times. I played all of the concerts. He first came to the WSO in 1965 in the old Winnipeg Auditorium on Memorial. And then when we moved over to the concert hall, he was still there. The concerts back then were called fanfare concerts. And I remember him vividly because he was an extraordinary conductor. He had a phenomenal ear. He had a tremendous sense of rhythm. And my initiation as a clarinet player you're a clarinet player too, I know, to the WSO was Liszt Les Prelude. And the very beginning, you have woodwinds. It's a woodwind opening. And he spent about 5 minutes balancing the intonation of all of us. And I remember him saying to us, the best blending agent is good tuning. Play it in tune, it'll sound like there are twice as many of you than there are. And the program back then, it was a full evening. And then at the end of the concert, we would have his special arrangements, the Richard Hammond arrangements of movie music, or the Irish Washerwoman, which is a Leroy Anderson from the Irish Suite, that sort of thing. So just getting back to your question, I would say Leroy Anderson for me, recalling that will recall for me Arthur Fiedler, his special style, and the Boston Pop sound.
But it's not only Leroy Anderson on the program, right? It's Debussy. I think you're doing the Clair de Lune, right? And
yes,
some Rossini as well. So it sounds like there's going to be a little bit of something for everybody. And I think even as I was saying earlier, John Williams was somebody I grew up watching with the Boston Pops, and I think there's a little bit of John Williams music on the program as well, right?
Right, yeah. Correct? We have Yoda's theme is on there. So we have some John Williams, we have some Viennese music, Roses from the South of Johann Strauss. We have another program actually coming up in a few weeks called Back Down the Danube. And we will do 11 pieces, 9 of which are from the Strauss family. Maybe we can chat about that later.
Absolutely.
After we get closer. But yes, Debussy Clair de Lune is on there, music by Granados, the Intermezzo from Goyescas, other interesting things. But again, it just reflects back to the light classics idea of the original Fiedler Pops concept.
James, your phone's ringing. I'll let you go. Thanks.
Oh, no, it'll be, we have an answering machine. It'll get picked up.
Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's going to be just a great concert, and people can stream it by going to, maybe you want to just give us a website where people can buy tickets for the streaming for the show tonight.
It's the easiest one to remember, WSO.ca.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, James.
Okay, pleasure, Chris.